Nigeria's relationship with China, particularly regarding loans and the diaspora impact, is a critical lens through which to view its broader international relations. As of today, this dynamic involvement involves some economic ties like infrastructure development, like geopolitical shifts, with implications for Nigerians standing among other nations. So today in the Diary of a Broken Man, we analyze these aspects and whether Nigeria is actually gaining or losing in its global relationship with other nations and China in particular. Remember to subscribe, to like, to share, and to comment. And this is the Diary of a Broken Man, where we dissect political, economic, and social issues. Do well to subscribe. So, Nigeria's China relationship is what we are discussing about today, and we talk about loans and economic ties. Loans from China. Nigeria as a nation has increasingly turned to China for financing, especially for infrastructural projects. As of March 31, 2020, Nigeria's debt to China stood at $3.121 billion, roughly 3.94% of its total public debt and 11.28% of its external debt. According to the Debt Management Office (DMO), by September 2020, this had grown to 3.3 billion, reflecting a 136% increase since 2015. These loans, often concessional with 2.5% interest, 20 years tenure and 7 years grace periods, have funded projects like the railway example, Lagos-Ibadan, airports, power stations, and communication networks. In total, Nigeria has secured $5.6 billion in loan agreements with China, with $3.1 billion outstanding as of 2020. These relationships deepened under the President Buhari, who sought alternatives to Western lending like IMF and the World Bank, which often imposes stringent conditions. China's non-interference policy and the focus on tangible hardware like road, railway, etc., align with Nigeria's development needs. However, concerns about debt trap surfaced in 2020. Okay, when a clause waiving sovereign immunity in a $400 million ICT loan sparked debate. The then Transport Minister Rotimi Amaechi and Justice Minister Abubakar Malami clarified these as standard arbitration clause, not a sovereign surrender. And the China's embassy echoed that loans are mutually beneficial. Okay? By 2025, China's lending has slowed globally, with annual loans to Africa dropping below $1 billion in 2022, the lowest in nearly 2 decades, due to domestic economic pressure and risk aversions. Yet, Nigeria remains a strategic partner. On March 29, 2025, these ambassadors, Zhu Dunhai, highlighted over 5,000 Nigerian students in Chinese universities and completed infrastructural projects, urging a shift to high-value exports. This suggests a pivot from loan-heavy engagement to broader economic collaboration through China pullback since 2016. Peak, leading at $28.4 billion, has exposed Nigeria's fiscal vulnerability. We are vulnerable. Okay? We need to tell ourselves the truth. We are vulnerable, and so we need these loans. Unfortunately, borrowing is not my problem. My problem is, what do they do with the ones they have borrowed, or what did they achieve with what they borrowed? Sometimes nothing. They borrow to loot. Borrow to squander and to loot. It's appalling that we have descended to this point where people borrow money on behalf of Nigerians and Nigerians can't even account for what they borrowed for. Diaspora Impact. The Nigerian diaspora in China, though smaller than in Western nations, influences bilateral ties. Over 8,000 Nigerians live in Guangzhou, many as traders, fostering a 20 billion trade relationship by 2019, up from 1.86 billion in 2003, heavily favoring China with 17.5 billion surplus from 2015 to 2018, basically. Nigerian students in China, supported by scholarship and training facilities built by Chinese firms, enhance human capital ties. However, racism against Nigerians in China, notably during the 2020 COVID-19 evictions, has strained people-to-people relationship, prompting diplomatic protest for Nigerians. You can't take it away. Racism. Some people feel that they are more human than others. And it's appalling for somebody to think like that. Everybody has red blood. Color is just a difference of what you see. The whole component of the body in everybody is the same. From the head to toe, from the brain compartment to everything is the same. If care is not taken, the Nigerian is more intelligent than you, only that he has less opportunity. So I don't understand where racism comes from. It's appalling. Relationship or relations with other nations, Western nations, US, UK, the EU. Now, historically, Nigeria leaned on Western powers for aid and investment, but relations have cooled as China's role grew. The US and the UK remain key security partners, example, the counter-terrorism in the Northeast, but their economic influence has waned. The US has criticized China's debt trap diplomacy, yet Nigeria's shift reflects frustration with Western conditionality. Example, IMF structural adjustment. Trade with the US was 8.2 billion in 2023, dwarfed by China's volume. Nigeria's diaspora in the US, over 400,000, and the UK, over 200,000, remit billions annually. 20.1 billion in 2022, far outpacing China's diaspora in impact. But this hasn't translated to strategic leverage. Even with all these, still they don't consider us, worthy partners. Russia and emerging power. This is another thing we talk about. Russia's presence in Nigeria is growing, particularly in security, arms sales, and energy, as seen in Niger Pivot post somewhere on X, suggests Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and UAE are new controllers of Africa, pointing to Nigeria's diversification from Western reliance. Saudi Arabia and the UAE invest in oil and infrastructure, but their scale lags behind China. China still remains the most promising among these, even with the strings attached, but still, keeping those things aside, we see they are more strategic and more interested in building or development than the West. Africa's neighbors and ECOWAS. Nigeria's regional influence as ECOWAS economic powerhouse is challenged by internal instability like Boko Haram and banditry, terrorism, and debt burdens, particularly tied to these Chinese loans. Relations with neighbors like Benin Republic and Niger are pragmatic but lack the depth of China's engagement. Is Nigeria actually gaining or losing? This is a question we need to ask ourselves in all these, whether with loans we get from China, infrastructural loans from US, from UK, from the EU. Are we actually gaining, or even from our brothers in Africa here, our sisters and brothers from Africa? Are we actually gaining or are we losing? So first, we talk about gains. Gains, infrastructure. Chinese loans have delivered critical projects like railway, roads, ports, airports, bolstering connectivity and economic potentials. Economic diversification. China's push for higher value exports could reduce Nigeria's oil dependence. 90% of exports, which is appalling that Nigeria abandoned everything just to focus on oil. Strategic autonomy. Aligning with China, Russia, and the Gulf states offer Nigeria alternatives to Western dominance, enhancing geopolitical flexibility. Diaspora benefits. Remittances from the West and the human capital from China strengthen Nigeria's economic and skill base. Where do we lose in all this? Our losses. 1. Debt risk. Servicing 77 trillion in total debt as of 2022 per some report strained Nigeria budget with China's share, though small, adding a pressure and global interest rates hikes. Trade imbalance. The 17.5 billion deficit with China reflects an unequal partnership with Nigeria exporting raw materials, oil, and importing finished goods only. Sovereignty concerns, while not a trap, loan clauses and opacity fuel public distrust, risking political backlash. Western drift. Reduced Western investment and influence could limit Nigeria's access to advanced techs and markets. In conclusion, Nigeria's relationship with China via loans and diaspora ties is a double-edged sword. It's gaining infrastructure and strategic option, but losing physical establishment and trade equality is something we need to talk about. Globally, Nigeria is pivoting towards a multipolar stance, balancing China, Russia, and Gulf states against a receding Western presence. The net outcome hinges on Nigeria's ability to leverage these ties for sustainable growth rather than deeper dependency. As of now, it's precarious gain, progress with strings attached. Progress with strings attached. And I hope we learn. Let me know in the comment section what you think about our relationship with China and some other nations, and how you think we can, better relate with these nations for our own good and for further development of our nation rather than creating more dependency, constant borrowing to do nothing. Let me know in the comment section. Remember to subscribe, to like, to share, and to comment. This remains the Diary of a Broken Man, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.